Welcome to Whole Hog Politics, powered by the Hill Sunday. I'm Chris Stirewalt. Today we're going to chew the fat a little bit with Tom Malinowski. He is a Democrat who represented a suburban New Jersey district from 2019 to 2023. This week he ran in a special election, or over the last 2 weeks, for his district. It was the district formerly held by Mikey Sherrill, who's now the governor, created a vacancy. Before he went to Congress, Mr. Malinowski was a career diplomat. He held a bunch of big time posts in the State Department. He was, maybe still is, at the McCain Institute. And we're very grateful that he is with us today. I could call you ambassador. I could call you congressman. Maybe will you let me call you Tom? Would that be okay?
That's the only title I have right now. So
That's cool. It's cool. That's right. All right. So first question is, what do you think is wrong with you that you wanted to go back to Congress? The theme of this year is everyone wants out. I think we're probably going to set a record for retirements, and people not seeking to return. So just as a level setter, why did you want to go back?
Well, so to be fair, it's mostly Republicans who want out. I think Democrats are very much looking forward to potentially being in the majority in the House next year. And a lot of my Republican friends from when I served, between the frustration of being in a party that no longer really behaves like a political party, and the feeling that they're going to be losing the majority. Like that's why we're seeing a lot of retirements. Um, yeah, look, I mean, I actually loved my time in the House, and I feel like there's a lot happening in the country that I want to do something about, and I couldn't think of any better way to have an impact than running and having that opportunity again. Unfortunately, it didn't work out.
Okay, so you were part of, and stop or correct me at any point. You were part of what I would call the broad functional foreign policy consensus in American politics. Um, I think you even interned in Bill Bradley's office. I know you worked as a young man for Daniel Patrick Moynihan. These are like the all stars of moderate sort of strong American foreign policy, sensible domestic, the kind of Democrats that Republicans used to say they loved. And that your roots, that when I look at your career and I see you as part of this sort of broad foreign policy consensus that emerged out of the end of the Cold War and going forward. And what I know about politics is that voters don't care. It's not that voters don't care about foreign policy. It's that it's hard to move voters talking about foreign policy. So maybe one of your first challenges in all of this is the thing that you are the best at and that you have devoted a life of public service to is not something that tends to get voters engaged.
So obviously, I didn't run on foreign policy in any of my in any of my races, but I will take issue with that a little bit. I think
Okay.
first of all, I think voters saw my experience both in the races that I won and even in the last one that I lost as a plus, including my national security experience, including my experience standing up for American values around the world, because that was a proof point in terms of what my values were. In my first race, the slogan that my media advisors came up for me. Normally, I came up with my own stuff, but this one I didn't. Was he stood up to dictators, he'll stand up for you. It was a values statement. It told people something about my own commitments and who I was and where I came from, and that was politically very, very helpful. And especially at a moment when a lot of people, particularly Democrats, are concerned about the rise of authoritarianism in our own country. The fact that I'd spent my career going up against the likes of Putin was definitely a selling point.
Okay, so describe for everybody a little bit about the district. I characterize this as the battleground of New Jersey. It's a Democratic leaning district. There's been redistricting a couple of times over the course of your political career. But basically, this is the corner of New Jersey where you have affluent suburbanites,
Yes.
the group of people who have trended away from Republicans. The places like Passaic County and other spots like that in northern New Jersey used to be places where Republicans could do pretty well. Those voters tended to move have tended to move toward the Democrats in the Trump era. Then there was a little snapback for the previous gubernatorial election. Talk about the district. Talk about the voters.
It's, as you said, it's a suburban district. People are highly educated. They're more affluent than average. And 20, 30 years ago, most of the towns would have had Republican mayors, Republican councils, Republican members of the state assembly and Senate. And today it's completely different. The number one issue in the Democratic primary that I just ran in was democracy in America and the abuses of the Trump administration against the rule of law. And so that's, it's part of the political transformation of America in the last 8 to 10 years.
So that's for what I said is a long way of saying is that you're the kind of candidate that matches a district like that, right? You are
Well,
these
yes.
aren't these are not radically progressive Democrats. These tend to be this moderation is a feature, not a bug in a place like this. So when I watched from the outside,
I would just say moderation in every respect, except in the sense they're not moderate about opposing Trump or about the defense of what they would consider core democratic and constitutional values.
for sure.
Those aren't issues that any Democrat running in a district like the one I just sought to represent can afford to be seen as compromising on.
Moderation and defense of liberty is no virtue. I think
There
some
you
guy,
go.
I
That's
think some guy
exactly
said
right.
one time. But so I watched something totally bizarre happen, which is that AIPAC, which is the American-based pro-Israel Zionist organization in American politics, came after you in this primary. Now, I stop me at any point if I'm mischaracterizing it, but I had always seen you as a candidate, as a member of Congress who was broadly supportive of Israel's right to exist, Israel's right to defend itself. I would have broadly lumped you in with the Democrats who were pro-Israel, or at least not anti-Israel.
Mhm.
And then when AIPAC came after you, I thought, well, this is kind of cuckoo bananas. Why would a group that is pro-Israel target a pro-Israel Democrat in this primary when it could risk a strongly anti-Israel candidate winning, which is exactly what happened. Looking from the outside, it is exactly what happened. And did I see that correctly?
Yeah, so the diplomatic term of art is precisely cuckoo bananas. Um, it's a highly specialized term that you and I
That's
understand.
very much so. It's from the
Obviously, yeah.
literature. Yes.
So yeah, it was weird. And you're correct. I strongly believe in Israel's right to exist and defend itself as a Jewish and democratic state. That was my voting record. That's my conviction today. AIPAC had two problems with me, and they were quite candid because we talked about it. Problem number one is that I wasn't willing to commit to them that I would unconditionally support any request for military aid that the Netanyahu government in Israel would make of the United States, which to me is just a common sense position. I'm pro-Ukraine passionately. I would not say I unconditionally would support anything that Ukraine wants from us. I'm pro-Taiwan, same answer. I have concerns about some of the things that the Netanyahu government has said and done, as do most Americans, as do most Jewish Americans, as a matter of fact. And I think that the US government should have the ability to make its own judgments about how best to support Israel. It needs to be done and consistent with our interests and our values. And so they told me they had some concern about that statement. And then they said to me, one of their officials told me, quote, some of our members are concerned that you would be influential in Congress, Tom. In other words, the Democrats
Yeah,
would
yeah,
listen
yeah,
to me,
yeah,
right? So
yeah.
if I departed from their hard line even slightly, that would be scarier than electing a very progressive anti-Israel person because
Oh,
the
I
party
see.
would listen to me.
That person could be marginalized more easily than
Correct.
somebody who has standing and credibility. Da 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 da. Okay, I get
Correct.
that. Now, the less cuckoo bananas way to look at it, and it's still a marginal idea, but the idea would be the district has been redistricted slightly to make it slightly more favorable to Republicans, and that by submarining you, and I think you only lost by 1,100 votes or something.
Well, it's still being counted,
Okay.
high hundreds.
Yeah, a very narrow margin.
Yeah.
That if they could successfully submarine you and get a Democrat in the general election who was unacceptable to voters in the main in the general election, that would give AIPAC a chance to get a Republican in who would be even more who would be they would that they, who they would love. What about that idea?
Yeah. So, first of all, they don't care if it's a Democrat or a
Right.
Republican. Um, and yes, they I assume will now do what they can to help the Republican win in the special general election in this district in April. And then if the Democratic nominee who won our primary, Analilia Mejia, survives that, they've already said that they want to recruit someone to run against her in the regular Democratic primary in June. I think they're going to have a hard time,
Hmm.
honestly, in April in particular, just because Democrats are in this climate. We are overperforming in special elections. I think most Democrats, even if they may think she's too far left, are going to stand by her. I've endorsed her in the April general election. But yes, that may be part of what AIPAC was thinking. And then there's also another factor, which is that whatever the outcome in our little race in NJ11, they wanted to send a
Yeah.
threatening, intimidating message to Democrats running in the midterms all across the country. If you step out of line, we will do to you what we did to Tom Malinowski. And I had hoped that by winning this race, I could then say to my fellow Democrats that this can be beaten. But unfortunately, the the outcome is a little bit more threatening and intimidating. If you're a Democrat running somewhere in a close race for House, anywhere in America where there's no margin for error, you have to hesitate.
Hmm.
If you think about the prospect of some group dumping $5 or $10 million into your race in the last 2 weeks on negative attack ads. And by the way, I think really important here, this is not just AIPAC that has the capacity to do this. Look at the crypto companies with their $200+ million super PAC and the AI companies that are threatening to do the same thing. And honestly, like whether we safeguard artificial intelligence is, I think, a more important issue to most Americans and to most human beings on the planet right now than what our policy towards Israel is going to be. And as you well know, like that fear hangs over every conversation about regulation in Congress today.
And but APAC is different. It sort of reminds me of a situation that the Republicans were in when the NRA was at the height of its power. It ain't what it used to be, but there was a time when the NRA was a huge, drew so much water in the Republican Party, or Grover Norquist group. The NRA more so was that they had a lot of money, they had a lot of clout, they had a lot of juice in primaries, but it came at a high cost. And so it looks like to me, AIPAC is in a situation where a lot of Democrats would like them to stay out of their races, or maybe, but if they come to help you, right, then it becomes a primary election problem, right? Then now you're encumbered by something that in many Democratic primaries is going to be a mark against you. And talk about where you think the median Democrat in that district is on the question of Israel and on AIPAC and all of this stuff. How potent an issue is it and to be pro-Israel? Unpack any of that you want.
I think the median Democrat is where I am,
Okay.
certainly in this district, that they're pro-Israel but anti-Netanyahu. They're pro-Palestinian but anti-Hamas. That's the reasonable, principled middle ground. And they wouldn't want AIPAC interfering in any election in their district. But what AIPAC did here, they didn't do under their own name. The ads didn't say AIPAC,
Mm.
nor did they mention Israel. That they were funded by AIPAC's super-PAC, which most voters don't recognize as AIPAC. AIPAC also supported another candidate, a third candidate in the race, who did not do very well. Our former lieutenant governor in New Jersey, Tahisha Wei, who
Oh
finished
yeah.
distant third place. I've made clear that they need to stay out. I've made clear that if they do back a candidate, either openly or surreptitiously, in another Democratic primary in this district, I will do everything in my power to make sure that candidate loses badly. And I think we can make AIPAC support an albatross in a lot of Democratic primaries, but I also don't think that, that'll necessarily stop them.
So just to put your analyst pundit hat on
Mhm.
briefly. So the poor voters of your district are going to have are going to have too many elections this year. They're going to have a bunch of elections this year
Mhm.
now. So as a consequence, the Democratic nominee, let's say, and you've endorsed her, supercharged by this Democratic turnout wave, that she does get past a Republican candidate who looks correct for the district. Looking at him, he seems like he's talking about getting the Gateway project back up online. His issue set and the things that he's been elected to office before in the district as a mayor seems like he's right for the district. But let's say that she gets the juice, right? That this huge 17-point Democratic differential from 2024, and we saw the gubernatorial election. So let's say she's propelled through. Now we go into a general or into the actual election immediately.
Mhm.
Basically, the special ends and so begins the thing. I assume that your nominee, Ms. Mejia, will run again, especially if she does win.
Yes.
And I assume that the Republican candidate, if he win or lose, probably runs again because he's already spent the money and spent the time to do it. Talk to me about the general election where the Democratic oomph, special election oomph won't be as oomphy because the turnout will be higher.
So, well, I'm very confident the Democrats will hold the seat in November. Hmm. And I, just as I'm confident the Democrats will win the midterms and that we'll take back the House for the same reasons that the elections are nationalized under Trump. And I even though I agree with you that the Republican nominee in this district, Joe Hathaway, is does seem to be making the right noises for a New Jersey
Hmm.
Democrat, I just don't think that voters here are going to want to mess with the possibility of a Democratic majority. And to give Mike Johnson another vote. I don't think that that's possible. There is there are questions about the June primary on the Democratic side, and whether there will be somebody challenging Ms. Mejia at that point, and making the argument that that this is not a movement progressive district. That
Hmm.
this is a, yes, it's Democratic, but it's much more of a moderate suburban Democratic district that generally does not elect candidates like that. Um, and if so, would AIPAC uh, not take my advice and try to dump millions of dollars into the race again, which I think would be extremely unfortunate and would cause me and a lot of other Democrats to line up strongly against anyone who they back.
Is there any turn of these tumblers with all of the possible permutations that has you running again at any point this year? Is there some scenario that includes you running again?
I, I've not made any decisions about my future, including what I'm having for dinner tonight, much less whether I would run for office again. It's, this was a very intense experience that we all went through, and something, you win and lose in politics, and that's just the way of the world, and we all expect it. But the last 2 or 3 weeks of this race were particularly intense and disturbing, and I think I need a little bit of time to think about what all of that means.
I think a lot of voters in this country these days feel exactly the same way about politics. So I'm sure they have your commiseration. Uh, you have our thanks. Thank you for spending some time with us. Thank you for your service. Diplomats are so essential to what makes America America. So thanks for your years of service doing that. And thanks for being willing to get into the arena. So Congressman, we thank you. And America, I have to tell you, if you were from Westfield, New Jersey, you would know that the inspiration for the House and the Adams family is actually right there. If you knew that, you would know Tom Malinowski already. But if you don't, there he is. Congressman, thanks very much.
Thank you so much.